Folks, welcome into another edition of Bullet Points. A couple days later, same attitude. Kevin Messeri here with Mike Bunt to break down pretty fairly quick breakdown of the UB Akron game that we just witnessed here on New Year's Day. Happy New Year's to all of you and to Mike as well. We're here once again, 3-game skid here for UB. They've won one game against a D1 opponent since December. It's just been a pretty poor stretch of basketball from UB. Being, they're in a 1-4 D1 slide here since Park Point and at some point in November there, Mike. So they're in a rocky patch might be one of their rockiest stretches in the last 5 years.
Yeah, they're struggling big time right now. 3-game losing streak, and it's not like the losses even came against very good competition. You lost to Canisius, a borderline top 300 team. Then you lose to Miami, who at the time was in closer to 200 than they were 100. Now in the net, I think they've jumped up to around 137, 136. So a little bit more respectable. And now Akron, another team in the mid 150 type range where you think they'll settle this year. And the scary thing from the last 2 games were the second half performances were just dreadful. You allowed 58 points at home against Miami in the second half, and then you follow it up by allowing 54 points in the second half today against Akron. The defensive intensity has not been there, and what's also makes it even worse is that typically in the past, this Bulls squad has had the offense to make up for it. Now they simply don't. They're basically a 3-man team, 3 individuals that can stand out by themselves, and if any one of them are off on a given night, it's going to be an uphill battle. And today, you didn't have Josh Mbala, and Ali just destroyed UB down low.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Like they're missing their third best player in Mbala, maybe second, depending on what you want to consider him versus Segu. You're missing probably your best bench player in Fagan as well with COVID protocols. Jim Whitesell's still on this extended COVID absence. It's supposed to be 5 days. I don't know, in New York State now. I don't know what's going on with this extended absence here from your coach. He's been out for COVID last year, so there's some issues there. Angus Thorpe just is not getting it done as the head coach here. He's putting in weird lineups. He's putting in guys that haven't had minutes together. He's making mistakes down the stretch with Williams. Your game at its brink, 6 to 8 point deficit. You're still keeping Williams out of the game. What does it matter if he falls out? You're down 6 to 8. You need to get him in the game. What are you saving him for when you're down 10, down 12? I just didn't agree with that decision there late in the game when you're already missing Mbala and Fagan in this game. There's no down low presence. There's no threat. Segu's really your only threat in there at times. I remember a lineup today, Mike, of Segu, blocker. You had Ty Perry in there. It was just not a lineup you would expect to see from this unit. And if you did, you were expecting a lot more. Ty Perry really struggled in this game. A transfer from Fordham, A-Town. We've talked about him a little bit, wanting to see more minutes. Well, we saw today why he gets the minutes that he gets. Quite frankly, he's not beating out the guys in front of him. Just a pretty bad performance, 2 for 5 shooting. 4 fouls. Not really filling up any stat sheet. 1 rebound, 2 assists. That's just not good enough. From 18 minutes. That's just a pretty poor performance. He was the only bench scorer today. Curtis Jones continues to not be able to find the bucket. That's got to change from your backup point guard. You don't need 50 points a game. You need 5 to 8. You need something like that Mark Sears line as a freshman. Curtis Jones isn't getting it done either, coming off the bench, and just Harden is falling out in back-to-back games with zero performance. It's an issue on the bench. We've talked about it, but it's even worse than I thought, Mike. I thought we'd get something from some of these guys. Blocker goes in, fouls, and turns over instantly. It's almost an automatic at this point. The team isn't playing very good basketball. Maceo Jack, still missing threes consistently, playing a little bit more, a little more effort. You like what you see from him a little bit at times, but he's still not getting it done. And then you just have Bruton, that just a volume shooter, shooting 4 for 10. Like that's a good day for Bruton. Just quite frankly, you can't complain about him when there's so many other issues. But shooting 4 for 10 is just another paltry performance from a guy that's just poor.
Yeah, this team is lost right now. They don't know their identity. They don't know what they are. All they know is that they have 3 talented individuals, and the rest of the guys are just trying to figure out where they fit in on this team. The problem about that is this was supposed to be a special year. This was the reason why you kept Jim Whitesell as your head coach. You wanted to keep basically Williams and Segu on this roster and then hope to keep Graves as well. You already missed out on the first opportunity to win when you had Devontae Jordan year 1. Year 2, you had Graves. That was a missed opportunity as well, as he didn't really step up as a senior in the way that many fans thought they would. This is opportunity number 3 with Williams, Segu, and Whitesell's best recruit so far in transfer, Josh Mbala. And this has honestly been the ugliest of the 3 years. We've been told each year it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's not. It's getting worse. And it's going to be significantly worse next year when your most talented players are gone. And the thing that is very frightening is what you just mentioned. All year in the beginning of the season, we were asking, why aren't we seeing guys like Ty Perry? Why aren't we seeing Contrell Blocker? Why aren't we seeing Kulo Matting? It's the fact that they're simply not good enough to play against quality competition at this point in the season. And that's a concern because there's only one way you're going to get better, and that's by going out there and playing quality minutes, but they're detriment every time they're on the court. Blocker, it's one thing I was actually texting somebody today. You look at a lot of these Whitesell recruits that have come on, and a lot of them have been 3-star guys or transfers from bigger programs, and we get excited about a lot of them. But I've noticed kind of a theme with the majority of them. They are all quality athletes that have this potential for a high ceiling, but their floors are so low. They're high potential, but you got to develop them. And you think with a coach like Jim Whitesell, who we were told is a developer, that these are the type of guys that you would be seeing maybe a hit rate of like 30-40%. You'd see a couple of them really stand out. And there's still a ton of time with Matting and Blocker, but we're seeing he really hasn't gotten these guys to elevate their play. And I don't know, we can go over the same things we've been talking about all season. There's too much ISO ball. This team doesn't have enough quality shooters. Yeah, they hit 9 threes, I believe, today, but not enough quality shooters. They don't play as a team offensively. Defensively, they don't play on-ball defense. They allow teams to hit open looks. They obviously the refs. It looked like the refs struggled today. There was a huge disparity pro Akron in terms of free throw shooting, which obviously was a big difference in the game. But even when you look at that, if you see one team going to the hoop and getting foul calls almost every chance they get, wouldn't you think maybe we should attack the hoop and try to do the same thing? UB had no answers. Once you had a 14-point lead turn into a 12-point loss, that's a 26-point disparity over the course of the last 25 minutes of the game. This team is not the favorites to win the MAC. This team is not the favorites to go on a run in Cleveland. This is right now, frankly, a team that is just trying to be a top 5-6 squad in the MAC regular season and being hopeful that they'll be in position to get better so they can possibly make a run. But there's no point talking NIT, no point talking metrics, because right now they're going down, and pretty soon we're going to see sorry for the long-winded answer, but pretty soon we're going to see a UB squad that's net rankings are in the 130s if they don't get some impressive wins, which in the MAC this year, you're not going to get impressive wins.
Yeah, 104 right now, Ken Palm. So they're finally getting there. 170 on defense. Like, it's just dropping like a fly. Like, their defense just isn't good enough. You're supposed to have Thorpe and Whitesell with developers, like you said, as well as defensive presence. We aren't seeing it. You can't let up 55 points back-to-back nights on a second half. Like, it's just
112 points in the second half combined, the last two. And that doesn't count.
You're running out of energy.
That doesn't count Canisius, which really just losing that game, we might as well just include that in that same category. So,
yeah, just really bad all around second half performances. I mean, that's what you're accustomed to. Don't forget they were down 12 at halftime against Canisius and, played a little bit better in the second half. But I mean, it's either one half or the other. Like, they're playing pretty poor stretches of 10 to 15 minute basketball. You saw it today. I think it was, I can't even remember seeing this around, was like 27-7 run or something like that. It's just you scored 7 points in like a 15-minute stretch or something. It was just another gap that you can't have from a program that's supposed to be in the top 100. Can you drop a game to Miami, Ohio? Sure. I mean, that's you'll see. I'm going to guess you're going to see Ohio do it. You're going to see Toledo do it. You're going to see whoever at the top of the conference. But you can't do a 3-game losing streak right in the middle of your season to start MAC play. Like, we've seen them go 0-2 and then go on these crazy runs. Like, it's happened before, but you just don't see it with a team that doesn't have a bench, that is struggling to find defense. that is struggling to find consistent coaching, that is struggling with inbound plays. They lost because it couldn't inbound the basketball, Mike, at one point this season, a couple of games ago. I mean, 4 straight plays they couldn't inbound the ball.
That happened against North Texas too, where they couldn't inbound it and almost blew a lead late in that game. And you know what? You said one good half, one bad half. That's been the story of their season. How many complete games have they had this entire year? I can name only one off the top.
WKU. Yeah, one.
WKU. Yep. Because I don't count Point Park. I don't count St. John Fisher. Those are against non-D1 competition. Western Kentucky, it almost seems like more of a fluke in hindsight than anything symbolic about this team. And really, North Texas, that was a decent win. Good squad, but not a great team. They lost a lot from last year. They're around the top.
Not that good of a team.
So right now you're really sitting in a scary position because not only did you just lose to 2 teams that you would really say are what you'd say middle of the pack average MAC teams, but even the bad MAC teams are tough to win on the road. When you're playing in front of 100 fans at Eastern Michigan, or you're playing in front of 500 people at Northern Illinois, it might seem like, yeah, we should destroy this competition, but those are often the games that teams in the MAC overlook and end up losing. So we started this year. I vastly overrated this team. I admit it. I was really wrong on my prediction. I said, I think 24-7 or 24-8, something like that, and 15-5 in MAC play. This team right now, the way they're trending, 13-7 would be an accomplishment, because that would mean you're going 13-5 the rest of the way. I think you're looking at a 12 to 13 win team if this team ends up having all of their games in MAC play and does well. It's not going to be a 15-16 win conference situation, which is really disappointing when the MAC is actually having a very down year overall.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you have Ohio about to rip their 5th or 6th straight win, 49-38 with 5 left in Western Michigan. They're not playing their best basketball, but that's all you need to do. It's quite frankly, you look at that and you're like, well, the MAC's down in general. That's probably the top 2 team versus bottom 2 team, and it's a 10-point game. Like, you're looking at that, but that's what UB needed to do. I know you can look at it optimistically and say they got rid of probably 2 of their top 5 hardest games of the season already in MAC play. So there's conceivably a run in there. There just is, based on metrics, based on luck factors, based on you're not going to have the other team shoot 40 free throws. You're not going to get all those calls. You're not going to get an offensive foul on Jonathan Williams one way on the same play, the exact play prior. No push-off called on them. It was just a little bit of absurd. I got to mention, we've dogged the team, but that was absurd officiating. It was terrible. I don't get fined. It was terrible officiating. The MAC should be embarrassed. Watch that game back. It was embarrassing officiating, just from start to finish. They tried to even it up after there was already a 10-point result Akron's way. They tried their best. That is an embarrassing performance by MAC officials.
10.5 minutes left in the game. UB had 20 personal fouls. Akron had 10. Now, I'm not a believer.
It's embarrassing.
I'm not a believer that the foul calls have to be even, because I think that's human nature. A referee and fans are going to think, well, it has to be around 50-50 because you figure things are going to be pretty even overall. I don't believe in that, that has to be the case. But it did seem a little one-sided for sure when you're seeing almost every call go one way for a period of 5-6 straight minutes to open the second half. One thing I do want to say too, Kev, I know we're being hard on the team, and a lot of people are going to say, well, you guys are too critical. This team, all that matters is the one weekend in Cleveland. And at this point, I would agree with that. Right now, all that matters is the one weekend in Cleveland. You and I don't think it's over for this team. We still think this squad can compete for a top 4 seed in the Mid-American Conference. We still think they can win in Cleveland and go to the NCAA tournament. We're just saying from an overall expectations, how we started this year, thinking this was a top 50 to 75 team in the country to where they are now, it's a disappointment. But if you're a UB fan, continue watching the games, continue, I guess, having some hope, because you'd like to think over the course of the next 2 months, they will eventually go on some type of run. And hopefully they can carry that momentum into Cleveland when that eventually happens. It's just, they're not going to have that 25-win season, 22, 23-win season that many were hoping. This might be an 17, 18, 19 win type year the way that they're starting.
I mean, the problem is like just statistically, they're going to be in the 4-5 game and then have to match up with the 1 probably pretty early on. I just don't see a 3-game stretch from this team. It's just not going to happen, in my opinion. I'm not going to sit here and say they can't win 3 games. Okay, if we're going to say all that matters is that weekend, have you seen anything that tells you they can win 3 straight against potentially a Miami in round 1 and an Ohio in round 2 and then an Akron, Kent, Toledo in round 3? You've seen nothing that shows you that you can do that. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
To be fair, we were having this conversation around the same exact point last year. January, UB was struggling mightily. Last year, we were very down on Jim Weitzel, and then they, I believe, what was it, like a 7-game winning streak or something like that? And then they got hot in February, and they got all the way to the MAC championship. So things can turn around. It's just they're not giving us the faith that we necessarily would need to see something like that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was it's looking like a 3-1 stretch to start last year, though. So like it was kind of a little bit different. They dropped a couple in the middle there. They were coming off of an overtime Syracuse loss. Did start off with a 2-win stretch against Ball State and Western. Really only had a stretch of Bowling Green and Kent where they lost in mid-January. But there was enough there still for me, like really not a bad loss on the schedule. Like they lost to Bowling Green twice. Like that was probably and a pretty decent Bowling Green team at the point. But other than that, like they lost to Ohio 76-75, and then railed off that stretch of bad teams that I'm saying is going to happen. Like I'm saying they're going to have that.
They're going to go on a run at some point.
The team was better with Javon Graves. A lot of people thought maybe because of his draft thing that he was working on, like, maybe we'd be better with the Jack and a Brute in kind of combo. It is not better. This team is not better than last year. I'm sorry, it's not.
Yeah. It's period. It's been, I think, the biggest thing that has killed this team and fans in the last 3 years is just expectations. Nate Oates raised that bar so high that we knew it was going to drop off, but we thought maybe a drop off to here, and they're dropping off further than what we ever thought. Like Javon Graves last year he wasn't bad, but we thought he was going to be much better. And it's kind of the same thing this year. We obviously UB loses Javon Graves, and we think Macio Jack can step in and be that 3-point guy. Yeah. Maybe not be the go-to scorer, but maybe have a role that would mesh better. But that would be assuming that they're playing that type of team basketball that would lead to that. One thing I do want to point out, and I'll ask you before I bring my opinion up. Do you think they win this game with Josh Mballa in? Because I think that's a big factor in this contest.
Yes, especially if they were calling all those, like we talked about earlier, those down low, like you said, why wasn't UB matching them? And Mballa gets, yes, because I think that could have been what evened out the score. It's almost like the refs looked at it and were like, UB's out this number, Fagan, and they're out Mballa. They're going to struggle down low, kind of preconceived. They kind of just, it's almost like that's what
conscious, like not even realizing that they're doing it, but human nature.
They're like, okay, UB's going to struggle. We need to make sure that, we account for that for Akron side, that UB's best forwards are out. Like, let's make sure we are looking for that as a team, or as an officiating group. And I do think that that's enough. Just like last game, I think it's a blowout without Mballa. I think they played that bad against Miami, where we're arguing about free throw shooting, and he didn't shoot great from the line. He didn't, and they didn't today. It's like they don't care. Like it's all concentration. It's all muscle memory. It's all, quite frankly, just your ability to kind of zone everything out and go with what you know. And they're just not doing it. They're just not going through the motions. This team's vastly different than last year. To assume that every season we're going to have an 8-game winning streak because last year we did it. You're just going against that last year's team didn't lose to Canisius. Yeah, like I'm sorry, they didn't.
Got a comment right here too from John Snyder. Said Jack was guarding post guys the entire game, and Mballa would have changed that. It's a good point. Jack, obviously, he's a 6'5" guard, and
he struggles on defense all the time, though. Yeah, and you saw it.
Yeah, Ali today went for 32 points, 7 of 12 from the field, 16 of 22 from the free throw line. Every time he got the ball, he knew nobody on UB was going to be able to stop him. And Mballa changes this game 100%. And then you have Fagan off the bench. That would have been another guy to pick up fouls. doesn't help that Williams is in foul trouble, Hardenet's in foul trouble. The whole team is in foul trouble, and you don't have young guys that you believe can step up and give you quality minutes.
Like Matting's still not even getting the ding minutes, but he's that bad. He can't get minutes.
And that's the scary thing is because Matting was a guy that was a 3-star recruit that had offers from Clemson and other bigger programs. So I don't know how you
can't get minutes when you're and Brock your 3 top 4 forwards are out. He doesn't get minutes in that situation.
It's concerning.
I got nothing
that we've seen a lot in recent years. Even when Oach was coaching, he found minutes for Segu and Williams when they were freshmen. So Oach found time to give them minutes when he had an all-star team surrounding them. And maybe Oach felt more comfortable because they were killing teams half the time, and he knew that he could get by with putting them in for a few minutes. But even you see Javon Graves when Oach was coach, he got minutes as a sophomore and some minutes as a freshman to where he built up his confidence where you thought he was going to be that breakout player. So obviously there's something going on in kind of we're seeing some of the same things in the football team where the youngsters really weren't getting minutes this year either. And it's tough because, as we said, we believe UB wins this game if they have Mbala. But that still doesn't excuse the performance today and how they lost.
Well, you can say one thing. They've won a game without Janathan Williams. They have not won a game. They weren't able to win without Mbala. So, maybe there's something to that. The fact that they can overcome a volume shooter who gets in rhythms and maybe they play a little bit tighter across the board. But without their third best player, potentially second best player, and without their, best, really Fagan's their sixth man. He essentially is in that role, especially how quickly he'll come in at times for Skogman. It's just, they just didn't have a forward game today. And this is what old UB team, it is. This is literally what old UB teams used to look like, which is Javon McCray and nothing else. And you got to see that a little bit here today. Everyone's scared of going back to Reggie Ball. And they're like a Segu today away from being a Reggie Ball team. They're like a talented Segu being out or something away from being a very similar Reggie roster. Straight up, Mike.
And that's scary. An interesting game today too, because he had obviously the 19 points, the 4 assists. Those numbers jump right off the page. Also had 6 turnovers though. And I feel like in some of these big games, turnovers have been
they bug him. Yeah.
And he's one of those guys who are extremely talented. One of the more talented guards I've seen on UB throughout the years. But sometimes what makes him so good is also his biggest detriment. He likes to freestyle. I sometimes think he just, you know how they say some people start a sentence and they don't know where they're going? I feel like that's sometimes Segu on the basketball court. He does something not knowing where it's going to head, but more times than not, he finds a way to get a good result. But sometimes it can be ugly. And today we saw the good and the bad. The 6 turnovers, that's too much for your starting point guard.
And the issue is I think I've heard some talk that it's UB's best recruiting class ever. I'm not sure where that's coming from. 24/7 calls it the best class in the MAC, but they're ranking just Matting, because they got a 3-star recruit. Well, we're still Matting.
You can't base stuff off of just 24/7.
I don't know what they're using though to claim that. Matting
24/7 hasn't even existed for
and they don't do mid-major very well. They do Power 5 pretty decent. They don't do mid-major.
Okay. So what 24/7 has, which is pretty cool, they have the ranking of the top recruits in program history. But for the most part, that's going back only 10 to 15 years. It's not going back deeper than that. So for example, there's been high school All-Americans that have committed to MAC schools in the past. If you go pre-2000, we're not going to say you can't say that Matting and Blocker is the best recruiting class in the MAC.
When they can't get on the court.
Zeke Marshall went to Akron as a top 100 recruit. Trey Ziegler went to Central Michigan as a top 50 recruit. We got to stop acting like Cottrell, Blocker, and Matting are guys that are elite. They're good recruits. They're both 3-star guys that deserve some recognition. But what we're starting to see is the 3-star label is starting to be kind of generously given out lately. It used to mean something to be a 3-star recruit. Now,
do they hang around, Mike? Not getting minutes on a team without depth? Do either of them not go to the portal after?
You got to wonder. I think
after they all run away. Like,
It
you're
all
losing.
depends on if they're on the same page with coach or not, and what were their expectations coming in. Sometimes it used to be common knowledge that if you were a 6'10" big, that you weren't going to see the court in year one. You're probably going to see a few minutes year two, and then year three, year four would be the moment. So under the
With the
old way of
guards?
developing, matting would be, you wouldn't be concerned about it. You'd be more concerned about blocker, because normally guards with a ton of athleticism, even if they're raw, should
Not
be
getting
able to
minutes
get a good
against that
amount of minutes
Ryder,
in a
though?
mid-major program. Like, you got to think, like, Contrell Blocker almost went to, what was it, Georgia State or Georgia Southern with Lanier, and then late commit to UB. You got to wonder if he's regretting staying close to home.
Well, that's my point. That's my point. My point is like this: like, he's sitting there looking at the roster today, saying like, I'm probably the fifth or sixth best player athletically on this team. Like, he's probably thinking that without Mbala, without Fagan, Brock's out. Like he's looking at this like, I need to get minutes today. Like, but you're playing a volume shooter in Bruton, who quite frankly makes mistakes every time he's on the court. Like, he makes up for him, but he gets to make a ton of mistakes in the game. It's because their new recruiting coordinator coached him. Let's not forget that the misses so far. Chance Robinson, you've missed on, Malik Zachary. There's been some big misses in this. This team has had, Savion Gallion. This team has had some guard misses. It's been bad. Like, they've had some really bad guard misses. Not that Blocker is, but Blocker's going to look at it and see Segu leave. He's going to see Janathan Williams leave. He's going to see Josh Mball leave.
Maybe
He's
he
going to
sees that as his opportunity.
Two ways. He sees it as an opportunity, or he sees it as, I'm leaving too. This team sucks, right?
It's impossible to know, because college kids now, they all have different mentalities.
Don't they err on the portal, though? Look at the football.
Most of the time, I would tend to think that if you're not getting playing time, you'd rather go somewhere else.
Correct.
So the younger mentality is, they're not playing me, they don't believe in me, I'm going to transfer. The question is, if you do have that mentality, would you rather play at like an Albany or a Stony Brook and get your 17 points a game playing bottom 150 basketball? Or would you still look at UB and say, well, this team has a history of being good over the last decade. If I get my opportunity, I could be a good player here.
Why not Canisius? Then you can play every minute. They beat UB. Why can't you, just an example, like, why can't you just say a team like, in the realm of Canisius, and be like, well, what's the difference? Our stacked team that I'm not getting minutes on lost to this team anyways.
So what's interesting is, a lot of times, and I think like I said, we're guilty in the recruiting of sometimes of making our opinions based on what the recruiting services tell us. A lot of times when a player transfers, like, I know definitely in football, I'm guilty of this. When a player comes from Wisconsin or comes from another bigger school like Texas Tech to UB for football, I'm thinking that player is probably going to be successful at UB, because even though they weren't able to get on the field at Wisconsin or Texas Tech, they should be more talented, or they have a skill set that was attractive enough to a P5 school that they should be able to at least exploit in the Mid-American Conference. But I think sometimes we overrate that. There's some guys that go to UB that might have had the talent to go to a bigger school, but were overlooked. But then there's other guys that were overhyped. And I think what's been happening with UB a lot with these transfers and these incoming players is the reasons that why they're coming to UB is they weren't oftentimes successful where they were. Josh Mbala being the one exception that's worked out, but he came to UB because he wasn't getting playing time at Texas Tech. LaQuill Hardnett was a redshirt, I believe, his year at Cincinnati. You look at Gabe Grant.
LaQuill Hardnett stinks. He's a terrible basketball player.
Yeah, Gabe Grant wasn't getting time at Houston. You look at Bruton was one of those, I want to do what I'm doing at Coastal, but I want to do it at a higher level at UB. So the same thing kind of with Ty Perry. I'm averaging 7.5 points per game in the A10, but at a very bad A10 school, that's a bottom 150. So I want to go do that at a top 100 school. So a lot of times, like I said, the transfer portal, you're taking risks. And the issue is they're not hitting on any of these. And what you're also not hitting on now is we're not getting these developmental guys. Weitzel has had too many players, as you mentioned. You went through the list: Chance Robinson, Xavier Gallon. He's gone through he's had too many misses, and when you consistently miss on recruits, your depth gets depleted, and you really need your few guys to be all-stars on the court. And just think if Segu or Williams weren't at the level that they are, this team wouldn't even be a 500 squad. They're really, UB is legitimately just a three-man team at this moment. And I'm not saying Skogman can't be okay. I'm not saying that Fagan's not good off the bench and that Maceo Jack isn't a halfway decent player, because he was decent at George Washington. They don't have enough ballers on this team. Everybody sees the big three, and they're hoping they carry the team to greatness. The big three on their own is not good enough for this team to be at the level we want them to be.
But we thought we'd get role players. We thought we'd get a bench. We thought we'd get freshmen. None of them have came to fruition. Curtis Jones is shooting 10% from the field. He can't score. I mean, the difference between like him and like we like to use Mark Sears or others in the MAC, doesn't need to be Ohio. He can't score the basketball. Like, he's got a long way to go to get minutes. If he's going to be the point guard of this team next year, dude needs to score the ball. Like, you're a point guard. Like, I don't need 50 points. You can't. I mean, you're struggling, dude. Like, you can't hit a three. You're shooting 10%. It's bad. Like, it's bad. The defensive side of the floor is not there for some of these guys, and that's why they don't play. Skogman has shown some offensive touch, but he's a liability on defense. Like, he rebounds the ball pretty well, but he just gets beat too much of off ball screens, and he just gets beat. I mean, he was bodied today. Like, I mean, there's issues, Mike, and it's worrisome that, like, even if they get in, those metrics are dropping to the level of like 14, 15 seed. I mean, to the point where, they need to go on a run. Making it to Cleveland and winning 3 games is great. And like, that might delay the inevitable of like, what does that mean? Like, to me, the team needs that for recruiting, period. The team needs to be like, we're in the tournament again. Look, we're always in the tournament. This new coach is in the tournament. Come play here, get some minutes. That's what I care about, because quite frankly, I think they're a 14 or 15. Like, and I don't think they have
14 is where you'd be looking at right now. I saw Joe Lunardi did his latest bracketology, which
it's probably right.
Toledo at a 13. I think, and obviously Toledo just lost. I think Toledo or Ohio, they still have the 13 in play, because they have good enough metrics to still get that point. UB, it really depends on how they wrap up MAC play. If they can get to that like 14, 15 MAC win total, maybe even 13, 14, 15, they could probably still squeak out a 13. But it's looking more and more likely that they'll be a 14, because I don't see them really getting to 14, 15 wins in MAC play the way they're playing right now. Ohio and Toledo, they still have that opportunity because they didn't suffer all the non-conference losses that UB had. I mean, you're looking at the Bobcats are 10-2 right now, so they'll probably be a 13. But it's tough when you're a 14. You can win, but you're playing a top 12 team in the country in the first round. That's not fun. Those are normally the games where you lose by like 10 to 15 points.
Right. So, Mike, there's a lot to be, and then there's a lot to be nervous on. If these are best case scenarios right now. We're talking best case scenarios going to be a 14. That's literally probably one of their, like you said, there's like some smidgen that they could get to 13. But their best chances, they go there and they play a top 12 team and get rolled by 20. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is 5th or 6th in the MAC, win a MAC tournament game at most, continue to have a losing record by Jim Weitzel in the postseason, and continue to not make the tournament in his tradition. So like, look, we owe it to the fans to tell the honest truth, and it's a struggle right now. It's a struggle right now for the team, and it's a struggle for the future is where I'm the most disappointed. Like, I can get over, like, we're Bills fans, right? Like, I can get over the team, losing to Jacksonville. Like, I can, or / Miami, Ohio. But can I get over the team? That team is Josh Allen, and that team can win any game that they play and can win playoff games. Do I feel the same way about UB, especially next year? They don't have like Segu was their Josh Allen or whoever, Jonathan Williams, whatever you want to say. They don't have that next year. You're looking through the window of a roster we've gone through many times. Mike, it almost reads like Weitzel knows that someone's coming back because they're recruiting that poorly. It's almost like he knows there's
That
not all these
certainly would
minutes.
change things. That certainly would change.
He doesn't have these minutes to give out. It's almost like he's acting like that.
If he knew that someone was coming
he's in
back,
the COVID year, yeah,
that could change. That could dramatically change that.
At least one of them
of the program. Honestly, just one of them coming back
helps.
I don't care if it's Segu, Williams, or Mbala. If one of them comes back, next year is a completely different outlook. Now, you're not saying they're going to be great, but you're saying, well, they could still be respectable because whoever would be the returning player, you just say, let's run our offense through them. And you still have a guy that you would look to as a star in this league. But maybe that's the case. It's impossible to know. We thought going into senior day that was the case for UB football. And now Dylan McDuffie and Kyle Van Treese are in the transfer portal with Van Treese recently getting an offer by Wyoming, and he might be Josh Allen 2.0. I'm joking when I say that, but it'd be fun to see him at Wyoming. So even if Weitzel thinks one of them is going to continue playing ball, doesn't mean it's going to be for UB. He would have to. That'd be quite the gamble if you don't go all out recruiting with the hope that you might.
Who's the most likely, Segu? Like, who's the most likely to return? Segu, probably.
It's not. I would think Segu, because when I look at Janathan, I think he's a guy. He's close with Weitzel. He's going to be playing pro somewhere. So you'd say Janathan, you'd love to have him come back, but I would say enjoy the start of your pro career. Go overseas to Europe and kick some butt overseas. Mbala, he doesn't have the height to be an NBA player, but I think he has the frame and the body to also go overseas and contribute in some function. Rondo Segu, love him as a player, lightning quick, but his size is a detriment when it comes to the pro game. He could be a scorer, he could be a disher, but I don't think he'll ever be as regarded as what he would be if, say, he was like 2-3 inches taller. So
sure. So, yeah, I think there's a chance, but I think if Williams leaves, they're very close. I mean, Weitzel might have one final play in him, just pull Segu for a final year and say, look, you can be the man here, 40 minutes. Like, you're going to be the only point guard. You give me another year to recruit. Like, I think it's possible.
I still think that's a tough.
I do too.
I feel like a lot of times the players that
I think he's going Power 5 is my opinion.
Yeah. I feel like most of the time the players that you get back for the 5th year or the 6th year in some crazy instances, a lot of times it's the players that know they don't really have the pro prospects. They want to have one more chance of winning a title or making a run. Like Jason Carter at Ohio, he went to Xavier. He wanted one more year, so he decided to come.
So maybe you're right. Maybe it's a forward. Maybe it is.
Or like a Brock Bertram. He came back because he had an opportunity to start this year for UB, and he really didn't have a chance to really contribute at a high level in the past. This was his opportunity to maybe go out and put some numbers on the board. So normally you'll see that with these higher ranked players, these scorers, these players that have better contributions, normally if they're coming back, they're trying to transfer somewhere where they can kind of still improve their prospects a little bit. They don't normally always come back to the school that they started their careers at.
Right. That's kind of where I'm going with it. I think maybe you are right. Maybe if there is, it's a forward. Maybe it is Mbala. But all those level of players like the Fagans, the Brutons, those guys have already on those they've already used some of those COVID years up. So maybe back to our initial point, maybe none of them. And maybe if we are in that scenario where you're looking at Skogman, you're looking at Hardnett, you're looking at Blocker, Curtis Jones,
and even at this point,
that's just such a bad starting lineup.
Even if that at this point, do they want to be part of what looks like it's going to be a rebuilding project at UB? Do they want to be part of a team that might go through?
Well, that's my argument for Blocker.
Like you think about it, and when you're in your 5th, 6th year of college, depending on when you started college, because a lot of these kids, they take
going back to
school. They start college at 19, some are 20. So some of these kids are, when they're in their 5th year, they're 23, 24 years old. Like the whole St. Bonaventure team is like 22 and 23-year-olds. Like they're all going to be turning like 24 next year. So at that point, sometimes you just want to move on with your life. You don't really want to be stuck in in college anymore, going to classes and
Well,
being told what to do by a coach. So I honestly, my view on everything, obviously, I still want this UB team to go to the NCAA tournament, and because you never know, you could always shock a team as a 14, even if it's unlikely. My whole thing is root for the best, hope they can somehow finish strong, get on a run. But I look at next year as a kind of the clearing of the board. You're starting over. This is a fresh start. You're not going to have the expectations next year. Develop these younger guys. Bring in some 4-year recruits. Don't try to just patch holes with a transfer or some JUCO. The time to do that is when you have the roster and you think you're a piece or two away from being great. Next year, start the building blocks all over again and start from the ground up.
Well, Mike, we have plenty of time to talk about the future. A couple more losses. We'll talk about it more. We're going to get there at some point, or the other way, and we'll rein it back in if they start to rail off some of these games. They maybe pull off a Toledo, Ohio win, whatever, going down the stretch. But I mean, if they lose to Toledo, lose to Ohio, they lose some of those games, they lose a bad one on the road, this conversation is going to come up again, and as it should. So pretty bad winter session for UB as the students are, coming back in a couple of weeks, but they're going to come back to a team that has won one Division I game since they left. And that might've been before they left, depending on when they left. So that's not what you're expecting to see from this program. That's not the level you're at. You needed to rebound with the Canisius loss with a couple of good MAC wins, or, you can drop a MAC game, but you just cannot continue to lose double-digit, scores.
I would have guaranteed a victory against Miami, Ohio after losing to Canisius.
I thought for sure that was a rebound.
I thought I'm not a believer in you lose a game, there's a fire underneath you. I know all the Bills fans, whenever Josh Allen loses a game and then he's sitting in his chair and he's all focused, Bills fans want to say, oh, they're going to kick the next team's butt by 20. Sometimes that happens, but I really thought just getting back to basics, having some time off would be what they needed to figure things out, and it hasn't been the case.
Well, Mike, great 45-minute show. We're glad for everybody tuning in. Mike has his 10-point WMU victory to gloat about, with scoring in the 50s again. Or was it 50s? Something like that for Ohio. But you take those victories. It looked like that early on in this UB game. UB was looking like, Akron was going to be held to 40s and the 50s, and then literally just ran out of gas. They don't have a bench. Mike, from Bullet Point 716, Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt. We'll be right back at you. About a week break here, but we'll be back at you in a week. Everyone have a happy new year and 2 better UB days. We'll talk to you guys soon.